All right, so my presentation was over a Christian and politics. Before I begin, I want to give you a small little scenario. I want you to think of a time when you're going to Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner and you're told not to bring up politics. Why is that? It's because you have an aunt and an uncle who don't see each other on the holidays, and when they are in the same room together, all they do is argue. All they're willing to do is sit there and yell at each other and not even bear to listen. Your aunt says that Republicans are the next Nazis, while your uncle is saying America used to be so great. They sit there and they argue. Or maybe your parents are telling you not to bring up politics because your family's already been torn apart by it. It's been torn apart to where those aunt and uncles aren't willing to sit in the same room with each other, and there's going to be two empty seats for your new Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner. Why is that? Where's the problem? The problem is politics represents our soul. People are finding their identities, they're confiding in it, they're finding out who they want to be through politics. The identity is found in politics, and you can say so much by having a little bumper sticker on the back of your car. You can find out so much about that one individual in America. And the idea of how politics is separated is defined as political sectarianism. Political sectarianism has three parts to its definition. Part one, where you view the other party as sinful or morally wrong. People find that the other party has bad behavior that needs to be fixed, and only your party is able to fix it. And you can see that both with the red and the blue pill. Two, people dislike and distrust the other party. People believe that the other party is out to get them and is trying to do something that's going to be harmful, or they're trying to do something in which will hurt them. American people think and hate the other party so much that they'll do harm to themselves before they give anything to them, to the other party. It is the idea that like a snake is wrapped around a saw. It keeps tightening until it eventually dies from so much pressure, so afraid of hurting from the other thing. And three, the other party is different or alien from oneself. You're no longer a human being, you're just a number. You're a vote, you're a color on a map, but you're not a human. People just want to get a vote to get their new politician elected into office. And it's hard to see that we've gone from being humans who are arguing to try to do the best thing for the other person to where we're now just sitting here and trying to get a politician elected that no longer helps the American people. So what is the political polarization that we see in today? Well, now that you see strife in America, you see an insurrection that gets caused by people afraid of the other party because those people are no longer human. These people are evil and coming in. You see people who are willing to vote for politicians who will vote to hurt themselves and to give in to the other party's ideals. An example of this is with Florida and Disney, where Florida purposely went out of its way to get rid of tax reductions for Disney for their political affiliation. You can see passing bills that hurt everyone and hurt America, that separate families that are immigrating into America because the immigration people are wrong. These people are evil and they're harmful to America. 3.5% of U.S. voters are willing to vote against their affiliated party for undemocratic behavior. However, people win by margins of 7% or more, which causes all 3.5% of those people who are willing to vote, did vote against their party, that party could still win. People are still winning even though it's hurting America and it's hurting one another. Now, that's a lot of politics with no Christian integration when we're talking about Christians and politics. Jesus says their high officials, in Matthew 20:25 through 28, Jesus says their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be a servant. I know it's supposed to be a separation between church and the state. Nevertheless, when you see such a high amount of politicians claiming to be Christian, but still using their authority to gain money, power, and hurt other families just to have a place in politics. Don't believe me? Here are the stats. 8 out of 9 of your current Supreme Court justices are claimed to have some Christian affiliation. 87.8% of your Congress claim to have some form of Christian affiliation. 100% of all presidents since the founding of America to the present day has had some form of Christian affiliation. All these people run under the flag of being a biblical Christian, but yet we're still seeing politicians come in and take power for themselves, gain millions of dollars while under office, and all we have seen is more polarization in America. We've seen more strife, more anger, and more hurt among each other. So what are some Christians actually doing about this? We're starting to see change. The AND campaign is one example of the people who are coming in and trying to help America for the better. They believe that the government has a role to play in supporting an economic security for families. They address that the church has failed their job and needs to be a beacon of hope. The church shouldn't be coming in and telling people how to vote, but should be giving in a benefit of what people need to vote for. It helps everyone and helps everything around. And then what can we do about it? What can you do about it? Every single one of y'all have created a presentation in which you voice an opinion on something. Maybe it's the foster care, or maybe it's how federal money is being unevenly given in medical research. That's a big opinion, but yet the voices are not being heard because we see a yelling match between two parties sitting there and can't seem to get along with one another. 2, address the issue. A lot of the issues that we see in today isn't addressing the true issue at hand. All it's doing is causing more anger and strife among people, and it's not getting anything done. We're not seeing change that needs to be seen. And 3, listen. We've seen a lot of people no longer feel welcome in politics. The middleman has died, in which you don't feel open to state anything against what the party is saying. You're either a Republican or you're a Democrat, and that's not how it should be. You need to sit there and listen to what the other person's doing because we're all human. People have their own opinions for a reason, and we need to realize that these opinions mean something to us, to God, and we're all made under the image of God. Thank you.
Guests, do you have any comments or feedback for Christian? Who are you voting for? I'm just kidding. Christian, great job. I really appreciate this. I really, really do. Warms my heart. I'm still thinking of a question, but I think.
Told you it's going to be more like an info commercial. Vote today. Register to vote.
You mentioned you mentioned what you think is at the core of this issue of polarization. Can you unpack that again? Like what? I know there's a thousand opinions as to why we're so polarized.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to say, okay, why is it now so difficult for Christians to treat one another well? Like what's changed?
I feel like a lot of it is the inability to speak your opinion. What we see now is, say you identify more with Republicans, but you feel more Democratic on an issue. The Republican Party will disown you or dislike you. We've seen people in Congress who have been disowned by the Republican Party and kicked out of it for just like saying whatever they want to. Same goes for the Democratic Party. I feel like it's the idea that you can't speak openly about what you think on an issue. You have to choose one or the other, and you have to stick with that all the way through. And including sticking with this one issue, you're having to agree to so many other issues at hand that you might not agree in, and so people don't feel comfortable speaking out, and then they're stuck just being silenced. That answers your question.
I like a lot about your presentation. Good job. Forgot to start with something positive. I like there's a term for what you were describing that, like what you just described and what you described in the presentation, where someone attaches themselves to something and it's just the party, and so we end up allowing our opinion to be shaped because of this one issue that's most important to us. We allow our opinion on other issues to be shaped because we're Republican.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, like, this is something that all the old folks in the room can attest to. Politics used to be such that I believe A, B, and C about a particular issue, therefore I'm going to vote this particular way. What's happened in recent years is now people are identifying as a particular party, and therefore they believe A, B, and C along party lines. It's something called ideological constraint. You feel constrained to conform your ideology to whatever your party says, such that when your party makes a decision one way or another, you tend to want to conform with that just because I am, after all, a Democrat, whatever, right? So it's deeply interesting to me. Say to us one more time, because I think it bears repeating. How many people? I don't think it's going to surprise anybody. I typically vote pretty conservative. I will say that this actually might surprise. Like, there have been elections where I haven't voted for the conservative party. Mm-hmm. I haven't voted for the conservative candidate because there were issues at play where I didn't feel comfortable voting for that particular party based on the issue and the position being filled. Right? what percentage of people are willing to do that? What percent, tell us again, what percentage of people who are willing to not vote for their party because the issues they disagree with from that party?
3.5%.
And did you see the math that he was doing there? 97% of your party, if you got a big party, you'll still win an election, even though you're doing things that people in your party don't actually agree with. This is the nature of politics. People end up getting away with stuff that folks within their party don't really care to. There's a lot to be said there. Here's my question to you. You mentioned the scenario, and I feel it deeply, because for me, it's not aunts and uncles having those conversations. For me, it's parents and siblings having those conversations, right? And this is kind of a step away from your project, but what's your advice? Do I have those conversations with my family?
I feel like, so like in the scenario, I was talking about how these people are still willing to sit down with each other in the first half. I think if people are still willing to sit in a room, there's still chance for change. You should be able to sit down and have a conversation with your brother, even if like you identify as Republican, but he identifies as a Democrat. That shouldn't be your like identity in that. Y'all should still be able to talk about these issues at hand and be able to like come to a conclusion at the end. Y'all might not agree, but you can still come to a conclusion where you respect the other side because everyone's still having these conversations. But if you're at the point to where you can't stand to be in the same room with each other because you hate each other so much for your political idealization, you need to look more into yourself and what you've done and then reach out to the other person. They don't want to talk. They don't want to talk.
Well said.
How would you respond? So this is, I'm playing devil's advocate.
Okay.
How would you respond to the claim that the reason I am so impassioned is because the other side has gone so far to the wrong that I now have to accept the necessary things that I disagree with? It's not that I am more polarized, it's that the other team is far more evil than they were 20 years ago. And so therefore the stakes are higher because the other team is involved in whatever villain you want to make them out to be.
So it's a really nice question. So have you ever heard of the horseshoe theory?
No.
So the horseshoe theory is that as we look more and more at the political polarization, both ends slowly start coming to the exact same conclusion. And so what we're seeing now is honestly, to a degree, most parties are actually saying the same thing. But it's been the propaganda of being like, this person's evil, like they're sinful. Again, like what we talked about with like morality and whatnot. Like the party's sinful. They have evil moral that needs to be corrected, and you distrust the other people. So you're having to, people feel like they're overcompensating by going on all these issues. So that's where you get like abortion, like the LGBTQ rights, where they feel like these things are being hurt and being distrusted against one another. And what we're seeing in the horseshoe, which is, again, the horseshoe theory, where people are coming in, are basically saying the same thing, but under two different lights, a red light and a blue light. And honestly, it just more comes down to the propaganda and the way our politicians have moved America to be so polarized. Because they're, you can sit there and watch a debate where they're not actually doing a debate, they're just yelling as loud as they can. And it just comes from the idea that the other party's trying to hurt you, where we see people just like, vote blue, vote red.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, like, I was taught that political conservatism is all about having a limited government and keeping government out of people's way. And liberalism is all about having an active government trying to solve problems. And you can say both of those things in a positive way. But what's interesting to me is like most of the conservatives that I know, depends on what the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
Some issues they want government out of the way. Some issues
government has to step in and protect it.
And all of my liberal friends are the exact same way, where on one hand, depending on what the issue is, government better stay out of it. They sound very conservative, and yet they would never call themselves that. So that's what's at work there, I think.
So Krista, did I miss why you chose the topic? And just curious, like how you're impacted by it.
Okay, so Mr. Satterfield can admit, this topic's gone through like many things. It kind of started out as a personal one. I wanted to see who I wanted to vote for next year. Because I was like, I don't know. I'm not real big I'm big in politics. I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. But then it just kind of more turned into there's a bigger problem at hand with people just not willing to like talk to each other. And like again, when there's those Twitter feeds were pulling up, I couldn't put most of the ones that I found on Twitter because it's just people yelling at each other. And I feel like with such a big impact of people claiming to be Christian in politics, there needs to be some like cool water put on top of this fire and like just helping just humanize people again, and it's not just a yelling match between two people.
But why does this matter to you?
Again, I'm just always been big in politics. I've gone to YIG for the last couple of years, and so politics was the only thing I could think of doing a presentation on, and so it just like hit close to me that way.
I love the shout out to the ampersand, the and campaign. Another shout out to just for those of you interested, because the news is so polarizing, the Pour Over podcast. It's 7 minutes long, comes out 3 times a week, and it does not give the news from one perspective or the other. It is, and if listening to the news makes you anxious, I will point you to this, because they intentionally point you to Jesus, not in a super cheesy way, but they like read a meaningful Bible verse and they're like, hey, it's gonna be okay, and then they like just tell you what's going on in the world. So
there's since we can talk, like I like how you pointed out like there's some positive trends here, because I think one of the underlying issues is every politician has a vested interest. Like by the way, I'm taking my time with this because I got a crop of soon-to-be voters. How many of y'all are going to be voting for the first time in November? First time ever? Cool. Please, 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 please hear what I'm about to say. There is an entire class of people in our United States of America. I don't use that word lightly. I rarely use words lightly. I'm using that word intentionally. There is an entire class of people in the United States that have a vested interest, meaning their quality of life depends on you thinking what I'm about to say. Okay, y'all with me on this? Like if y'all don't keep thinking this way, they lose their job, they lose their bends, they lose their quality of life, they lose all that stuff. If you don't think what I'm about to say, that the what is at stake in the next election is everything. Everything. The downfall of American civilization, your rights, your liberties, they're coming for you. Both sides are being told that. The Democratic Party is actively telling they're not constituents, it's partisan. The Democratic Party is actively telling people if Donald Trump wins the election, it's the downfall of democracy. The Republican Party is actively telling people if Joe Biden becomes president again, you can kiss your freedoms goodbye. You can kiss your Christian rights, your Christian liberties goodbye. You can send it all away. If I'm not a Christian, I might fall for that. But the Bible is telling us over and over again, one, you're not a citizen of this kingdom, right? My kingdom is not of this world. Why are y'all stressing out about this? This kingdom is 2,000 years old minimum, and that's only if you're going with the most recent. And also, you as a Christian have not been given the spirit of fear, but the spirit of love, the spirit of a sound mind. These people that are living in fear and want us to keep living in fear, they have a vested interest that we stay fearful. So whenever you have a politician that's trying to strike up fear for the other side, let that be the red flag. That hey, like they don't have that much power. I'm not too terribly worried about it because, frankly, I don't think any of those folks have as much power as the other side said they have. I'm sorry I'm rambling. I just think it's incredibly important for you to understand no politician is going to ruin the world for you. And if you think they do, you're giving them way too much credit. Way too much. Yeah, anyways, feel very, very strong about this. Classmates, y'all got anything for Christian? Yes, sir.
You think an answer to this problem could be like what an informed third party candidate, like this election, like RFK Jr. running like that.
Again, so like we learned in history class when we were like trying to construct a government, we had an idea of having multiple different parties. I feel like the two-party system's starting to fail us because we're starting to see this polarization. getting another party put in, the independent party, is going to be very like hard just to get put in, just because we're stuck in the idea of like you're voting for either or. But if more people can get on board for voting like for 3 presidents, like we used to have a 6-president party race, and the best president would win by a margin of 40%, something like that. I don't know, but I think if people could voice and be willing to vote for someone else, then yes.
Remarkably difficult thing to do. It's a numbers game.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't voted for a primary party candidate since I was in my 20s. I voted every year for that. So, yeah.
Do you think organizations like YIG and Follow UN are beneficial for the future of politics?
I think it definitely allows people to learn to talk to each other. Like we've gone through YIG, we did the bill side where you'd be sitting there and be like, why is this person coming up and proposing a bill that hair color discrimination is coming up? But you see people who have reasoning behind it. You might not agree with it, but you're still able to hear different opinions and come to a conclusion based on what you hear around you. And you can still sit down and talk with that person.
I've got 2 questions about YIG. And Model UN, I think, is the YIG particularly. And forgive my ignorance. I know nothing about it. I taught government for 12 years, and my school actively refused to get involved with youth in government. It's a longer story, but I don't know much about it. Deeply interested in it. First question is it true that most students involved with YIG are decidedly conservative? That's first question. Second question is, what type of insight, like Caroline was just basically asking, like, is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Mm-hmm.
What are some specific insights that you got from participating in YIG that help you understand government better?
So what was your first question again?
First question was, are most students,
conservative?
Yeah, are they?
We honestly see it more of the opposite. There's more
Really?
in South Carolina, which is the biggest YIG. Shout out YIG, South Carolina. But you see consistently.
Is that good? You don't know gang signs? No.
But so you can't say it for everything, but we definitely see there's a lot more liberal, like people who identify more liberal than anything. But you're still able to see both. Like it's more of like if I'd put it like be a 49-51%. So it's still pretty much half and half.
Okay.
So it's very common in like seeing what we'll see in like actual politics. In terms of like what you can learn about government through it, it's beneficial to know exactly how the process works.
Mm-hmm.
Like knowing like, as you can see with like the TikTok ban that's going through right now, people are very mad because it passed the House. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll pass the Senate, but I mean it's in a taxi bill, so it probably will. But it's one of those things where like you can actually see the steps. It goes through a lot, but also realizing like each vote, whoever you're voting for genuinely matters. Like whoever you're putting in the House, that's a vote. Whoever you're putting in the Senate, that's a vote. And knowing that each of those votes will add up, even if it's coming down to a 50-50 split.
Yeah. It's really interesting, like how angry people get about things that they don't know what's actually happening. Like they get really upset about things that's not as big of a problem as they think it is, because that's not actually what's going on. Like what Christian is saying here, it passed the House, but it is nowhere close to being a law yet. Maybe it has momentum, but everybody's up in arms, right? Living in D.C., I won't tell you what the particular issue was or who exactly they were, what side was protesting. There was this massive protest, like a nationwide, like everybody come to D.C., we're going to protest. And of the different buildings, like we've got the White House, that's the executive branch. We've got the Capitol building, that's the legislative branch. And then we've got the Supreme Court building, that's the judicial branch, right? They went to the wrong building to protest. Everybody lined up in front of the building, but they didn't realize that all of the proceedings are actually, it's across town. Like y'all are not even in the right place. So they're super mad about something that they don't even really know what's going on. Welcome to politics in the 21st century America. Like this is how that works. Anybody else got any questions, comments, feedback for Christian? To end it, I think it was David Brooks who said, no, maybe it was Robert B. George. Forgive me if I don't remember. I know y'all are super stressed out about who actually said this, but I think it was really wise. We don't need to learn to disagree less. We we need to learn to disagree better. Please, as a generation up and coming, stop stressing out about making everybody agree with you or agreeing with everybody. Neither of those things are good. You should be more concerned about being able to get along with someone you know you disagree with. Because Jesus ate dinner with people that vehemently disagreed with him. Making sense?